What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar thus far, which you should be watching for as time goes on. I'm also going to break down some very important things about technical analysis and very interesting moves for tomorrow based off what the TA is suggesting. Before I break into the devil's information, before I get into any more details and talk about Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, Supermicro, and all these different tickers, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very soon. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the markets. So on Friday, SPY got this very nice pump to the upside, approaching this 518 area. Once we hit 518, this thing started dropping. I gave you guys a big warning because we had some tight resistance up here. I told everyone to watch out because at that 518 level, we had some very tight chances of a potential rejection. And I told you to watch for that very carefully. So once we got that rejection, this thing continued to sink down to our supports, and we came all the way down into the 511s, approaching this previous area right here. This is where we had this previous resistance, now becoming support, very close to that area at this 511 zone. And if we do end up losing that, there's going to be a risk of an even bigger drop. But the question is, what's going to happen from here? Looking at the current daily candlestick on SPY, the daily is looking kind of weak right now, and it does suggest more downside is likely coming. Now, I'm not a massive bear to the point where I think the market's going to crash. I'm not saying that whatsoever, but I also believe that there's going to likely be a downtrend coming. This means that even if SPY does get some kind of rebound, we're going to likely continue even lower, and we have a lot of gaps to fill below, not to mention like other technicals and other signals that suggest that that's very probable. So I'm going to break down more information about that. I'm going to talk more about why that is. I'm going to talk about some data as well to break down my claims. So tomorrow is going to be March 11th, Monday, 2024. What's happening for tomorrow? We have some very interesting data. At 11 o'clock a.m., we have the consumer inflationary expectations coming out, which is very minor data, might not affect the market much, but there are two times to be watching for some volatility. At 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the 3-month and 6-month bill auctions coming out. Then at 1 p.m., we have the 3-year note auction coming out. That could cause some more volatility, but the main time to be watching for volatility is going to be at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, keep in mind, we just had daylight savings. So the times are essentially the same, but we had to move our clocks 1 hour forward. So if you guys aren't adjusted to that, make sure you're prepared and ready just to be safe. Now, for all of this, the data is going to be very minor for Monday, but that's because we're preparing for something very big on Tuesday. On Tuesday, an hour before the market opens, we have the CPI report coming out, and CPI is going to be very important. That's going to determine how big of a bounce the market gets and if we're going to continue to get a bigger downtrend. But I still do favor that based off TA and other factors like that. Now, looking at the current earnings coming out, we have Bullard and just a few others announcing earnings for Monday before the market opens. Then after close on Monday, we have Oracle, Casey's, and just a couple others. And then later on for the week, there's not really a whole lot else coming out. We just have a lot of retail stocks like Kohl's. We even have Manchester United on Tuesday, which is kind of funny. And just a few others. For Wednesday, we just have Petco and a few others, nothing too crazy. Dick's Sporting Goods, Dollar General on Thursday, and Adobe. And not much else from there, so it's all very minor data. Now, for the Fear and Greed Index, I just want to call out right over here, things are at greed right now. We used to be at extreme, now we're just at greed. And as time goes on, this is going to continue to shift. Market volatility right over here is at neutral. This is going up a little bit. It could actually go a little higher as time goes on, but this is going to depend on different factors, and we have to watch and see if that's the case. We're hovering above our 50 daily moving average, which tends to be a sign of weakness for the markets, and we'll have to see if this continues with the VIX. But now, with that said, I want to just talk about some charts and talk about something very important. What moves am I anticipating for tomorrow for SPY? So let's talk about this. Tomorrow is going to be Monday. If you look at the daily candlestick on SPY, this is looking very weak. Okay, it's very convincing and very weak. It's a big red bar. And generally, when you get big red bars like this, the market does continue to go a little lower. If not, we get a continuation move. But that's going to be our confirmation of a bigger drop. Now, what you'll notice is that when you zoom out of the 4-hour time frame, we have a tendency of liking to kind of like bounce very close to, if not at our 50 EMA. Do you see how SPY likes to do that? I know I'm zooming out a lot. Just look carefully. Look at the yellow line right here. See, the yellow line is touched, it bounced. Yellow line is touched, it bounced. The yellow line is touched almost here. It kind of bounces a little bit. So there's a very good chance, in my opinion, considering how bearish the candlestick is looking, that we might come down closer to this like 509 to 510 area. Then we might see some buyers try to defend it to establish a lower high. So we might see a little drop in bounce like move. We might get very close to this 510 area. Then we might see some more liquidity being grabbed there. And then we might see some buyers step in and try to defend it temporarily. Maybe it's because of CPI or something, who knows? But then, even if that ends up being the case, I personally don't favor that we're going to break like 518 to 520. That's like the zone I have marked up here as type resistance. I don't think we're going to break that. I think that's what's going to happen is we come down a little bit. We kind of test our EMA. We rebound a bit. Maybe it's because of CPI or something. Who knows? But then it's not going to be that big of a rebound. We're not going to fly up to 525 like that. We might see a little rebound later on during the week, and then we might end up continuing to sink even lower. So that's how you would basically define a change in market structure. That's how you would define a downtrend. I went over this over the weekend as well. So what I mean by this is look at the trend, right? Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. It's been making higher highs over and over and over again. But now I think we're about to establish a lower high the next time we get some kind of bounce. And I think that this is going to be the start of a temporary move to the downside, which the market is basically due for. And that's kind of like what my view has been. So, what is my prediction for tomorrow? So, let me clarify this, okay? I'm going to make this very simple to understand. I think it depends on how we end up opening depending on the 20 EMA. So if we open below this 512 area, I think we're going to be testing 510. That's very close to where this 50 EMA is going to be as it's trending a little bit upwards. So we're going to be very close to 510, maybe a little bit lower than that. And then we might start off kind of weak tomorrow. Then we might see some buyers attempt to kind of like defend this, push us back up to 512, if not 513 or so. Then we come right back down and we get a relatively weak close tomorrow. And then CPI will determine if we get a little rebound, a bigger rebound before we continue lower or not. All right, so for tomorrow, we might see the market drop a little bit more, attempts to rebound a bit, and then just continue lower and get not the strongest of closes. And that's going to be in anticipation of CPI. That is what I'm predicting, guys. Look for a little bit more downside, a little pop, and then a drop back down, and some weak looking price action. The daily candlestick might not be the strongest, and it may suggest even more downside. So I just wanted to give you guys a warning about that. All right. So once again, for SPY, we might come down a little lower tomorrow, especially in the morning, approach the 510 area, pop a little bit, and then continue lower to even lower levels. So watch for that for tomorrow intraday. And then CPI is going to determine if we get a big move to the downside or not. Now, on the QQQ, I'm seeing a very similar trend. We lost the support right over here, and it's just been continuing to sink lower and lower and lower, looking very weak right now. The QQQ looks very similar to SPY on the 4-hour and also on our other EMAs. We also got below our 50 EMA, which is a big sign of weakness. So this chart looks bearish to me. You could even interpret this as kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. We have this left shoulder here, the head. Maybe it comes down a bit, forms like a right shoulder, and then just continues lower. That's a very, very strong possibility. So what do I see for the QQQ? Basically, I think that tomorrow it's going to start off very weak, approach 436 or so, maybe a little higher than that. The 436s, then it gets a little rebound attempt. Maybe it's CPI, maybe it's something else. We come back, rebound a little bit, and then we just continue to sink lower into the lower 430s. I think that's going to most likely happen. We start off very weak, rebound a bit tomorrow intraday, come back down. Maybe CPI causes another rebound before we sink lower or not. We'll just have to wait. But ultimately, I think that this is going to start a downtrend as well, just like SPY. I think it might drop a little bit more, make its way back up, and then continue to sink. So watch for that very carefully. Watch 436, a test of that likely tomorrow. I think that's going to likely happen. How about for Tesla? How is Tesla looking, in my opinion? Just like SPY. This is looking weak. Tesla was trying to rebound and it failed. It had an inverse head and shoulders. It failed. And look at the trend. It's continuing to make these new lows over and over again. Tesla's looking very weak because we're getting so much bad news. There's copious negative headlines coming out about Tesla, continuing to bash the stock, making it look bad. So for Tesla, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing comes all the way down to 172 tomorrow in the daytime. Maybe it gets dragged down because of the market. Then it gets an attempt to rebound. It could push back up to 175, maybe a little bit higher, then continue lower from there. But you're seeing some signals of this on the technicals as we reject off our 20 EMA. So it might start off a little lower tomorrow, rebound a little bit, then continue lower from there. That's the most likely possibility in my opinion. So look for that move on Tesla. Watch support at 173.75, 172. We have this resistance to also be watching for at 175, not to mention 177.6. I think we might drop a little bit, get closer to the 172s, rebound a bit towards 178 or so, and then make our way down lower as time goes on. And then that's when Tesla could start dropping to like 168 or some other level like that. But that's what I'm seeing on Tesla. I think Nvidia is going to follow the trend because when you look at Nvidia, it looks very weak from this break. And we have a key support to be watching for around, well, there's 844 and there's also 834. So I do think this could drop a bit lower as we came down to fill this gap just like we predicted. So for Nvidia, I'm seeing something very similar. Let me just find Nvidia's chart. Where is it? I have it right. Hold on, it's right down here. So about Nvidia, okay, on the 4-hour time frame, it's the same thing that's going on. It's barely holding this key support, which happens to align with historical data at 844. That's where our 50 EMA happens to be. This means I think Nvidia is going to drop a little bit more, and we're going to be watching this test of 844. We might tag this, rebound a little bit, retest 885, then continue lower from there, right? So it might come down a little bit lower, rebound a bit, and then continue lower after that. That's most likely going to happen starting tomorrow, and then this could even continue into CPI day. The chart is showing some weakness and a big sign of a reversal after this big drop, which we haven't seen on Nvidia for a very, very, very long time, especially on a single day like this. So that's a major sign of weakness on the chart that I am seeing. So look for a little test of the 50 EMA, a little rebound attempt, and a continuation lower. That is going to be pivotal for the price action for tomorrow. On the other hand, unlike other stocks out there, Apple is starting to gain some strength finally because some buyers want to defend it, and also because all this bad news has been coming out for like much earlier than the market ended up dropping. So what this tells me is that Apple, it has resistance at 170.9. We have support at 170. We also have support at 169 and 168. I think that with this little formation, this is kind of resembling an accumulation structure. Apple might attempt to drop first to 170, maybe a little bit lower, then rebound and tag this yellow trend line again. I think we're going to try to tag this again in the 171 area, and we might get a rejection again. We'll see if it rejects or not. If we do break past it, there is a gap to fill above, but we'll have to wait and see. But I think that it's going to drop a bit, rebound and retest this yellow trend line. We'll see if it breaks or not. Apple is showing a little bit of strength compared to the market, so we'll see how well it does. But for now, look for a little drop, another retest of the yellow trend line, and we'll see if it rejects or not. I think that's most likely going to happen to Apple. So with that being said, guys, I hope that my analysis was very clear for the main five I typically go over. I'm just going to go over more tickers just for fun. A lot of the tickers that a lot of people are requesting. Let's go over all of these. So starting with Rivian. How is Rivian looking in my opinion? The chart has been showing a lot of strength recently, but now it's starting to pull back just a bit. We're going to be watching this support right over here around this 12.5 area. If we lose that, I think 11.96 is going to be tested, so watch that very, very carefully. It is starting to turn a bit, so it might get dragged down towards 12, close to 12 flat before it tries to get a bounce. So watch for that very carefully, and we'll have to see how it reacts. Part of why I say that is because the daily is looking kind of weak, and we have this gap to fill right down here. So I think it's going to be coming down towards 12.5, and if we lose that, 12 flat could be coming before it tries to rebound. So look for an attempt to drop a bit. For SoFi is showing a little bit of life, trying to push up a bit higher on the daily time frame, outperforming the market, and the 4-hour is still showing a lot of strength. So it might outperform the market and push towards 8.05 before it comes back down. We have this imbalance over here on the left side. You guys can see this. It's trying to push. So technicals do look a little stronger for SoFi, approaching CPI. So it might attempt to push a bit higher before this thing ends up turning. ARM, I know I got a request for this. We lost our 50 EMA. We're kind of sinking a little bit, not looking that great on the 4-hour time frame. And then on top of this, when you look at the daily is showing a lot of weakness, and it looks like it's trying to approach this support right here to 127. So I think it's going to sink lower towards 127. We'll see if we bounce off that or not, but we'll look for a test of 127 tomorrow. Supermicro showing some weakness. It's down another 27 points in the after hours. I think that there's a very good chance it's going to sink lower now, and I think that it's going to likely approach 1100 very, very soon. It's barely trying to hold 1113, but it's barely holding on to that. And I think that 1100 is coming. I'm going to be watching to see how well it holds 1100. There's also a gap in the 900s. I think 1100 is going to be tested. If we lose that, 1023 is next. So watch this carefully. The 4 hour is showing signs of turning. It may pop a bit first and then start sinking. So watch for that carefully. It's showing some weakness. For Palantir is barely holding our 20 EMA. If we lose 25.89, we're going to be coming down to 25.09. We're starting to turn right here quite quickly. So I think there's a very good chance that 25.09 is coming. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're showing some weakness right over here. If we end up, we're going to test 206.12 in my opinion. But it's kind of stationary, so it might drop a little bit towards 206, could even retest 204.5, but then it might come back up. The trend is still bullish on the chart, but I think it's going to retrace just a bit towards that 206 area, so we'll have to see how it does right there. For Carvana on the 4 hour is still trying to uptrend a bit, showing some strength right now. It's showing some strength, especially thanks to its earnings. So we're going to see how well it could hold above 84. As long as we hold that, we could see a retest of 88. As long as we hold above 84. If we lose 84, we turn back to bearish to 81, but it is still uptrending, still holding up decently. So we'll see how well it does. Now, I do want to warn you, there's a big wick right here, which oftentimes forms when there's a big move to the downside coming in the future. So maybe it pops a bit more and then comes back down. We lose that 84, 81 is coming to fill this gap. So I think that it might pop a bit, hold up for some time, but in the future, whether it takes a few days or not, there's still a risk of it coming back down. So watch for that very carefully. On Microsoft, this is looking kind of weak on the 4 hour time frame as we're starting to reject off our 50 EMA. There's going to be a risk of it returning to 401, so be very careful on Microsoft. It might come down a bit. Not looking the best in my opinion, especially after this big bar. To be bullish, you want to see it break above 410, start pushing system balance at 414. But right now, it's starting to reject. It's barely holding these levels, so there's a risk of 401.5 in my opinion. That looks a bit more probable. For AMD was trying to push, and you could see it popped very nicely, and it came right back down. So it got this nice wick that formed, and now it looks like it's going to be approaching. If it loses 205, I think 198.5 is coming, so it might sink a little bit more to 198 before we try to bounce. The chart is looking a bit more bearish in my opinion. For Netflix, we're all the way in the 600s, which is great, but we're kind of stationary, so it's not as weak as the market. Look for a retest of 600.5, then some sideways price action. Not really much on that chart. Excuse me. For the VIX is trying to uptrend right here. We have this nice gap to fill. But like I said before about this, with this uptrend, it's not really moving as naturally as before because we're seeing a lot of manipulation with implied volatility, kind of hurting these options holders. So I think that the VIX is at support at 14.67. We also have support at 14.27. It could retrace just a little bit and try to rebound a bit towards 15 plus. I think that there's going to be a good chance of this retesting 15. So a little drop and then a pop coming. The SQQQ, on the other hand, is looking quite decent. It's trying to break out. So this does signal some more downside for the QQQ. It might be approaching this resistance at 11.37. So maybe it pops a bit more and then it kind of rejects as the QQQ drops and then attempts to bounce at 436. The dollar index is showing a little bit of life. If this thing gets a big bounce, 103.1 could be coming. If that breaks, that would be a bearish signal for the markets. For Coinbase is on a very, very nice uptrend, still continuing to push, but just be a little bit careful. I think that as long as it holds above 250, we're going to be fine. If it loses 250, there's a risk of it coming down to 238, so watch for that very carefully. In my opinion, as of right now, it's continuing to uptrend. We did get this big rejection from 270, but overall, I wouldn't call it a rejection. I'd say it's more of like a liquidity grab, but it's still holding up very well, and there's a good chance Coinbase might outperform the market. There's no sign of any kind of rejection quite yet. On Google, now, Google is trying to push, which is awesome. We have some strength. We're approaching some type resistance at 137. If we reject off 137, 135 is coming again. And if we break past that, we're going to be bullish. But I think that there's a very good chance it's going to trade sideways for a bit. We might retest 137, trade a little bit sideways right here, and then we'll see what it does from here. But later on, there is potential for this thing to push towards 140. It's still showing some strength compared to the market. Amazon, it's a little risky because when you zoom out, we have a clear head and shoulders like structure. If we lose this 172 zone, I think there's a risk of it coming down to 167, if not 165. So a big drop could be coming on Amazon, especially thanks to the head and shoulders, if we get a break to the downside. We'll be watching to see if we get confirmation of this. I think it's a very, very nice setup, but watch for confirmation just to be safe and be careful with these head and shoulders. They're not always guaranteed to play out. But I do want to tell you there's a risk of downside for Amazon looking at the structure, so we'll see how it goes. On Meta, on Meta, I think that we're showing some weakness on the 4-hour time frame. We're going to be watching some sideways action at this 502 area. Then if we lose this, 494.9 is likely coming. So we'll see if we end up losing 494. If we lose 503, I think that 494 is likely going to be our next target. Honestly, I don't think that this is the best of setups, but I do want to note that we have this liquidity grab right here. If we lose the support, there's a risk of a little bit more downside to 494 before it tries to bounce. So watch for that very carefully. But with that being said, guys, I went over the majority of the tickers out there. My view of the market is that we could drop a little bit more. There might be an attempt to rebound coming depending on CPI. That I can't really promise. But ultimately, I think that even if we do get a small little rebound, it's not going to be that like massive. It's not going to cause the market to break to new all-time highs. I think that very soon the market's going to downtrend. I think we're starting a downtrend. We may drop a little lower from here, attempt to rebound, establish a lower high, and then just continue to sink lower. I think that's the most likely possibility. All right, that's the view I favor for now. We'll see how things go. Good luck tomorrow, guys. Make sure you watch the markets. I'll be back tomorrow morning with another update. So thank you for listening. Have a great day. Enjoy your Sunday. Do what you have to do. And don't forget it's daylight savings. So the times have been changing here in the US at least. So take care. Do what's best for your own portfolios and your lives. Relax. And thank you all once again for listening. And peace out.